What is happening in there? J Gaming Dude here, and I thought that I would actually make a list of retro Doom-like shooters because I'm a massive fan of shooters, and I specifically like retro-style shooters like Doom and Quake and Duke Nukem and stuff like that. And so I thought, you know what? Why don't I just make a list of all of the games that actually are in this sort of style that quite a lot of people might not necessarily know about? Because this isn't a particularly popular take. Because most people, when they play shooters, they want the bang bangs, they go into the man-mans, and that usually means Battlefield, Call of Duty, and now with Apex and Overwatch and Paladins and stuff like that, it seems clear that we're kind of moving away from that. And the thing is that for those of us that still kind of want that type of thing, I wanted to provide some suggestions. So I actually did wanted to kind of put Doom and Doom 2 kind of on here just to kind of show that this is the kind of stuff that I want to show in the list, so it just kind of gives an idea. So the first one that I actually wanted to put on, and this one I've kind of already given away, was Duke Nukem 20th anniversary, Duke Nukem 3D 20th anniversary world tour, which is the 20th anniversary edition of Duke Nukem 3D. It plays like Duke Nukem 3D, the locations are the same. I think they might have added another one, I can't remember if they did or not. And also the cheats work exactly the same, so this is kind of the closest to an actual retro game in more modern day, because this actually, the 3D World Tour, 20th anniversary World Tour actually came out in 2015. Has been around since, but just because people know that Doom and Doom 2 still very much exists on most platforms in the current day, some people might not know that there's also a Duke Nukem game around. Yeah, it's not the best, but it gets the job done, and it kind of is out there, it exists, so if it exists, why not tell people about it, you know what I mean? And for people who like to earn trophies on the PlayStation side, it is a very easy platinum that can be earned in 2 hours, so maybe that might be something that might, strike up a deal for you. The next on the list that I wanted to put up was actually Proteus. Now this actually came out, I want to say this year. Yeah, so this is actually a retro style shooter that takes inspiration from Doom, but see, I played through the game. There is hardly any story at all, because you don't really expect there to be much of any story or much of any dialogue. It's just a bunch of indiscriminate looking monsters coming up to attack. Well, yeah, it's just a bunch of monsters running up and trying to attack you. It kind of feels like it's trying to ape the bits and pieces of hell from Doom, but it still feels different enough to where it's you don't know quite where you are, but it's just, you kind of feel like you're in hell, but not really, sort of thing. Anyway, the idea is you're running around shooting monsters just because. Again, this type of Doom-like shooter usually is you switch your brain off and you're just going over running around, kicking everything's teeth in. In the case of Proteus, there are a lot of teeth involved, and it has a very interesting style that I feel like a lot of people won't know about this game, and I would highly recommend trying it out if you can. If you want to wait for a sale, that's perfectly fine, but definitely look up some gameplay, because I definitely think that this is one that a lot of people would definitely want to consider playing. Moving on from that, the next one on the list is actually, I'm not going to say the original Hard Reset, I'm going to say Hard Reset Redux, which is a re-release of Hard Reset, which came out in 2011, I want to say, roughly speaking, 2011, 2012-ish, so around that period of time. Maybe it could have been 2014 and I'm just completely misremembering, but Hard Reset is definitely more along the lines of the sort of linear shooter with no multiplayer. Look, multiplayer was definitely part of the retro style Doom shooter, but the thing is that Hard Reset takes its shooting mechanics in stride, but rather than demons in hell, it's mostly robots and machines, because it kind of takes place sort of in the future. And again, it's an interesting concept. Well, not an interesting concept, it's just taking a different place, taking different enemies. So if you want to mix up your Doom-like shooters, this might actually help. So if it's not Proteus, still kind of feeling like hell, but not really, but rather than running through as, not even a city, but like a small town in like sort of choreographed ways and being, shooting a bunch of robots, that could very much be up your alley. The next one on the list that I was going to put on was, and it doesn't have to just be Shadow Warrior 3, it could be Shadow Warrior 1 and 2. Again, all of them are fun games with way too many upgrades, secret hunting, and just a lot of, you don't need to care about what's going on, as long as you've got a sword and a gun, you can run around and kill everything. Because in short, like the first game was pretty much Lo Wang, our main character, running around. So he has to acquire a sword, but the thing is that, like, his name doesn't really mean penis for nothing, and instead, acquiring the sword becomes steal the sword, kill the bad guy who has the sword, and burn the house down. At the end of the day, like, it's just everything kind of, gets worse and worse, and then it becomes kill all the demons in Demon Town, kill your own master, and a bunch of other things. Everything just kind of, falls apart story-wise, but that largely doesn't matter because why would you want to do anything else except for run around and kill a bunch of zombies in first person using a katana? It's a hell of a lot of fun. So Shadow Warrior 1, 2, and 3, definitely I would highly recommend sort of jumping into, and I think 3 is definitely more modern as a title, so if you want the more retro feel style, I would highly recommend 1 and 2. 3 you can kind of jump into later on if you want a little bit more. And again, these games are relatively short, but they can be incredibly difficult if you play them on the harder difficulties, which Doom definitely provides, and I think that Shadow Warrior will also be able to provide in that space as well. And finally on the list, I actually have a roguelike first-person shooter based around magic. So like wizards that you play as in a shooter that is randomly generated, and you go from room to room in these randomly generated maps, killing a bunch of enemies. Ziggurat, and Ziggurat 2 to some extent as well. Yeah, you could play Ziggurat 2 and just ignore that Ziggurat exists, but it's, I would recommend giving both a go because they're both just as good. Ziggurat 2 is technically better, but again, it doesn't hurt. Again, Ziggurat is not necessarily bad, and it isn't deemed to be completely, it doesn't mean that it shouldn't be tried out at least. So yeah, simply put, you have to go through 5 floors, and each floor is randomly generated, so in the sense that there are a bunch of rooms, but rooms have different properties. You can get an item in one room, which can give you another weapon, can give you an ability, can give you another spell. You unlock different types of characters, which are sort of, I guess, in their way, permanent upgrades. If you die, you restart from the beginning. The first boss is always the same, but then the bosses for floors 2, 3, and 4 are randomly generated between a group of other bosses, and the final boss, which is the boss for the 5th floor, will always be the same as well. Actually, no. The first floor boss also actually does change, so it's only the final boss that is always going to be the same. The rest of the bosses in the game are going to be randomly generated, so you could have a lucky run and completely break the game in half like a giant Kit Kat, or you could end up struggling to beat the game once because you just have a string of bad luck over and over. So I guess it takes a rogue-inspired take on the shooty nature of how you would expect a Doom shooter to be, because there is reloading in a sense, but there is a lot of running around with a bunch of weapons as fast as a political campaigner through a minority district, but it gets the idea across, and that's just kind of, I guess, all you really need to know about a Doom-like game. So these are just a bunch of Doom games that are mostly indie, I want to say, mostly indie games. They kind of still very much follow that philosophy to some extent. It's not a perfect list by any means, but it's a bunch of games that I look at that I really liked playing, and I feel like if you kind of like it and you want to try something, this might be the way to go. So, with all that said and done, I'll catch you guys next time.